The next major category of image manipulation are transformations like rotate, scale, translate, corner pin, and warp. We'll look at all of those in a second, but right now I wanted to talk a little bit more about the reformat node and the crop node, which fall into this category and create a lot of confusion for people in Nuke. By default, the reformat node uses type to format, which means in order to get an output, you must select a format from this output format pull-down. I want to make this image 720p, so I'm going to select that here. You'll see that by default, Nuke has done a center extraction and cropped off the top and bottom. That's because resize type width is selected here, which means it's going to attempt to use the width of the original image and then discard anything else. I could also set this to height, and then it will use the height of the image, but you'll see because the aspect ratio of the image didn't have anything to support the areas outside, it's got this stretchy effect. If you click black outside, it will crop the image before reformatting it and then essentially pillar box the image like this. There's other modes that you can use as well, like fit, fill, and distort. And these can be useful if you don't mind the image being distorted. For example, if you were trying to reformat a texture or something like that. Let's go back to width. You can also use the reformat to flip and flop and spin or turn the image on its side. So this can be useful in situations where you want to turn the image by 90 degrees or reformat it in some other way. By turning off center, it's done basically a bottom extraction off the origin of the canvas, which Nuke considers the bottom left-hand side. So that's the basics of the reformat node. Hopefully that's demystified it a little bit. Let's talk about the crop node. One of the aspects of the crop node that confuses people a lot is the fact that when you select a crop region, it doesn't seem to do anything, even if we view directly at the crop node. So you can see I'm defining what looks like a crop, and it's cropping the image, but the position of the image I'm cropping hasn't changed. This is considered a feature in Nuke because what it allows you to do is to crop off pixels you don't want without changing the center point of the image that you've cropped. However, if you would like to reformat the image or recenter the image, you can check this checkbox here, reformat, and then it will completely trim off the areas outside the crop and redefine the canvas of that image. This is worth mentioning here also, the sort of active area of the image. These dotted lines define the bounding box of the image, which means that outside of this dotted line there's actually no pixel data. So it's not costing anything for Nuke to track these blank areas, which is one of the other nice features of the way that Nuke operates. So let's talk about some of the more common transformations. We've already seen transform, but let's review it just a little bit here. The transform will allow you to rotate, scale, skew, and translate an image. Hopefully you've already gotten some use out of that. There's some other really powerful image manipulations available, like corner pin, which will allow us to distort the image as if it was on a card that we can pin based on the corners, and we're going to use that in this week's exercise. So we'll learn a lot more about the corner pin node in this week's exercise. Nuke also has a node called Card 3D, which allows you to manipulate the image as if it was in 3D, even though this is all a 2D manipulation. So it doesn't really work directly inside Nuke's 3D system. However, you can pipe some of the values from Nuke's 3D system into this card to place an image in 3D correctly. And it renders much more quickly than the 3D renderer can render things. We've also got warp tools in Nuke that can be used for doing morphs and warps. So if you'd like to do a morph, which is going to be an exercise later in the term, this is the tool you would use. This is the grid warp, which just distorts things on a grid. And then there's also a spline warp tool, which allows you to warp things via splines. So that's an intro to some of the more prominent image transform and warping tools in Nuke, and we'll be using these in turn as we do projects through the term.